The imperial grand hall of Zelverin Prime loomed like a temple of giants, its vaulted ceilings stretching high above the assembled nobility. Warriors clad in ceremonial armor stood in rigid lines, their scarred, 10-foot-tall frames exuding a quiet menace. Golden banners, emblazoned with the sigil of the Zelverin Empire, swayed under the weight of the planet's artificial gravity. At the center of it all, seated on an obsidian throne, was Queen Soraya Vexrath, the undisputed ruler of the Zelverin. Her sharp, regal features were illuminated by the flickering embers of the ritual brazier before her. She observed the gathering with piercing golden eyes, her expression unreadable. Standing before the throne, dwarfed by the towering aliens around him, was Daniel Carter, the lone human in a sea of warriors. He adjusted the collar of his ambassadorial uniform, trying to ignore the hostile glares drilling into him from all sides. He hadn't come here expecting to feel welcome, but the tension in the room was suffocating. The Zelverin High Council had summoned him to this diplomatic summit under the guise of discussing trade agreements with Earth. Instead, it felt like he was standing trial. Daniel cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, what exactly am I doing here?" A ripple of laughter swept through the nobles. A dark, predatory sound. He knew how they saw him. Small, fragile, insignificant. But Daniel had dealt with pompous alien bureaucrats before. The real question was why he had been called to stand before their queen in the heart of her empire. Soraya finally spoke, her voice smooth yet commanding. "You stand here because I have chosen you, human." The laughter died instantly. Daniel blinked. "Chosen me for what?" Soraya rose to her full height, her form casting a long shadow over him. Adorned in her ceremonial armor, she was a striking figure, tall, powerful, her dark hair braided in the traditional fashion of Zelverin royalty. "Among all the gathered delegates, among all the warriors of my empire, you alone have intrigued me." Her gaze locked onto his. "And so, by the ancient rite of selection, I name you as my consort." The hall exploded into chaos. Daniel's mind went blank. He was what now? Nobles roared in outrage. A nearby warlord slammed his fist onto the floor, cracking the stone beneath him. The High Council's representatives stood abruptly, their faces twisted in fury. "A human?" One of them spat, barely containing his disgust. "This is madness. My queen!" Another stepped forward, his deep voice shaking the hall. "No outsider has ever been chosen. This is an insult to the Empire." Soraya remained unfazed, her expression calm as she raised a single hand. Silence fell instantly. Daniel finally found his voice. "Hold on. I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm an ambassador, not some kind of royal suitor." He shook his head. "I didn't sign up for this." Soraya tilted her head slightly, as if amused. "Did you not, human?" Daniel opened his mouth to argue but hesitated. The way she looked at him, like she saw something beyond the surface, sent a chill down his spine. One of the warlords stepped forward, his thick arms crossed. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, this is a disgrace. If this human truly thinks he is worthy, let him prove it." Murmurs of approval spread through the crowd. Soraya's golden eyes flickered with amusement. "Very well," she said smoothly. "I accept." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Accept what?" Soraya turned to him, her expression unreadable. "If you wish to reject my claim, human, you may challenge it. But by the laws of my people, you must do so through trial." The murmurs grew louder. Daniel sighed. "Of course, there's a catch." "What kind of trial?" Soraya's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. "A test of worthiness. If you win, you may leave as you came, untouched, free, and without obligation. And if I lose?" The warlord chuckled darkly. "Then you shall accept the queen's claim and become her consort by imperial decree." Daniel stared at the assembled warriors. Every single one of them looked like they could snap him in half. His instincts screamed at him to refuse, to walk away from this insanity. But something held him in place. Soraya. She wasn't mocking him. She wasn't dismissing him as weak. In fact, she seemed curious, as if she expected something from him, something more than what the others could see. Daniel clenched his fists. He had spent years negotiating with species that towered over humanity, fighting to prove Earth's worth to the galactic powers. And now he was being tested again. He hated backing down. He exhaled slowly, then met Soraya's gaze with unwavering determination. "Fine," he said. "I accept the trial." The gathered nobles erupted once more, some laughing, others scoffing at the absurdity of a mere human attempting a challenge meant for warriors. But Soraya's eyes gleamed with something else. Anticipation. She turned to her warlords. "Prepare the arena." Daniel swallowed hard. What the hell had he just gotten himself into? The days that followed Daniel's acceptance of the trial were nothing short of chaos. He was thrust into the heart of Zelvaran politics, a whirlwind of whispering courtiers, scheming warlords, and power-hungry nobles. Every step he took in the Grand Palace seemed to be under the watchful eyes of those who considered him an insult to their way of life. Yet, amidst all the tension, one thing was clear. He wasn't being treated like a mere human anymore. Queen Soraya's decision had ignited a firestorm of controversy. She had chosen him, Daniel Carter, a human diplomat, as her consort, and this audacious act had reverberated throughout the empire. The Zelvaran believed in the strength of bloodlines. Their rulers were not only born of superior genetics but had proven themselves through bloodshed, conquest, and unyielding might. The notion of a human, small and frail compared to their towering forms, being thrust into the highest echelons of power was unthinkable. But as the days wore on, it became clear that Soraya was not backing down. The queen's reputation as a ruthless and tactical ruler was well known, but even she seemed more than a little preoccupied with Daniel's fate. Daniel, for his part, was no stranger to political turmoil. He had survived on Earth's diplomatic front lines, negotiating with species much more dangerous than any of the Zelvaran. He knew that his trial was no longer just a matter of personal survival. His every move was being watched, not just by his opponents, but by Soraya herself, who seemed determined to see him succeed. But the pressure weighed on him, and every day felt like a tightrope walk between life and death. The palace was a maze of stone halls, gleaming metal, and the ever-present hum of tension. On one occasion, Daniel found himself alone in one of the palace's lesser-known chambers, preparing for his upcoming trial. The room was sparsely furnished, illuminated only by the glow of distant starlight. It felt like a brief moment of peace before the storm. That peace was shattered when a figure stepped from the shadows. "Human," came the low, guttural voice. Daniel spun, instinctively reaching for the blade strapped to his waist. But the figure was quicker, and a large hand slammed his wrist against the wall, pinning him. The warlord standing before him was easily a foot taller than Soraya, broad-shouldered, heavily armored, and with an air of brutality that made Daniel's blood run cold. "This is a mistake," the warlord growled, his voice thick with disdain. "You're a distraction to the throne, human. You have no place here." Daniel struggled against the grip, but the warlord's strength was unimaginable. "Let me go," he said, voice strained but defiant. The warlord's eyes narrowed, and he pushed harder against Daniel's chest. "You're nothing, a plaything for Soraya's amusement. But mark my words, if you survive this farce of a trial, you'll wish you had never come here." Daniel's mind raced. He knew better than to trust any Zelvaran warlord, especially one this close to the Queen's court. The assassination attempts against him were not a mere rumor. They were real, and the warlord before him was likely just another pawn in the game. In a burst of adrenaline, Daniel broke free, kicking the warlord in the shin and shoving him back. The force wasn't enough to knock the giant off balance, but it created the precious moment of space Daniel needed. He drew the short blade from his belt. "Stay away from me." The warlord smirked, clearly amused. "You think you can threaten me with that toy?" He raised his arm, and within seconds, he had Daniel's weapon twisted out of his hand, sending it clattering to the floor. "This is why you don't belong here," the warlord sneered. "You're weak." But Daniel didn't back down. His eyes locked onto the warlord's, and something in his gaze shifted determination, the same fire that had carried humanity to the stars. He wasn't going to die like this. Not in some shadowed hallway, at the mercy of some alien thug. He moved faster than the warlord anticipated, sidestepping his massive strike and landing a sharp elbow to his opponent's side. It was a cheap shot, but it bought him enough time to grab the warlord's arm and twist it behind his back. The warlord grunted in surprise but didn't immediately surrender. He turned to strike again, but before he could, a loud voice rang out from the doorway. Enough! Both Daniel and the warlord froze. Standing in the doorway was none other than Queen Soraya herself, flanked by two of her elite guards. She regarded them both with an unreadable expression. "You will not harm him," she said coldly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The warlord straightened, releasing Daniel, and dropped to one knee in submission. "My queen, I only wished to protect you." Soraya's golden eyes flickered with an emotion Daniel couldn't quite place. Disappointment? "If you truly wished to protect me, you would not engage in petty power plays. Leave us." The warlord hesitated for a moment longer before backing away, leaving Daniel and Soraya alone in the chamber. Daniel, still breathless from the encounter, turned to face the queen. "You knew that was coming, didn't you?" Soraya nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I am well aware of the dangers surrounding you, human, and you will face many more before your trial. But do not forget, this is my choice, and I do not choose weaklings." Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow, still trying to absorb the intensity of the moment. "I'm no weakling," he muttered. Soraya's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "Prove it, then." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving Daniel to contemplate the battle that was yet to come. The arena was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It stretched endlessly, an artificial coliseum built into the heart of Zelverin Prime's capital, surrounded by towering walls of reinforced obsidian. The air inside crackled with energy, charged with an anticipation that could almost be felt, thick and suffocating. The Zelverin had spared no expense in preparing this trial. At the center of the vast arena stood Queen Soraya, her commanding figure silhouetted against the blistering light of the twin suns. The entire royal court was assembled in the upper tiers, their gaze fixed on Daniel as he stood alone at the arena's entrance. He was alone, surrounded by thousands of Zelverin warriors, all of whom had seen him as nothing more than a passing curiosity. And now, they watched as he prepared to face whatever trials Soraya had devised for him. Daniel's stomach churned. He had barely survived the first round of mental games the Zelverin had played. But this was real. He was about to face death itself, or worse, humiliation. "Human," Soraya's voice rang out, amplified by the arena's speakers. "You have chosen the path of the trial. It is a test of strength, spirit, and determination. There will be no mercy. Survive, and you will gain the respect of my people. Fail, and your name will be forgotten." A cheer rose from the nobles in the stands, a bloodthirsty chant that echoed through the massive structure. Daniel could feel the weight of their eyes pressing down on him. His thoughts flashed back to the warlord who had attacked him in the palace. The first sign that not all of the Zelverin were content with Soraya's decision. They wanted to break him, wanted to prove that humanity was nothing but a fleeting distraction in their galaxy-spanning empire. But Daniel had no intention of being broken. The arena doors slammed shut behind him with a deafening sound, and a low growl reverberated from the other side of the field. Daniel turned to face the source of the noise. A massive, hulking beast emerged from the shadows, its form more like a nightmarish amalgamation of predator and machine. Standing at least 12 feet tall, it had the strength of 100 men, muscles rippling under jagged cybernetic armor. Its eyes glowed with a deep red hue, and its massive jaws opened with a sound that echoed across the arena. The creature was a brutal weapon, engineered by the Zelverin to crush any opponent in its path. The warlord's words echoed in Daniel's mind. "You're weak." He wasn't weak. He would prove it. The creature bellowed again, its muscles tensing, and then it charged. Daniel barely had time to react before the beast was upon him. He dodged, rolling to the side just as the creature's massive claws swiped through the space where he had stood. The impact of the strike sent a shockwave through the arena, kicking up dust and debris. Daniel's heart raced, his mind calculating every move, every possibility. He had to be faster, smarter. His hand instinctively went to the short blade he had been given, a symbol of his humanity, but it felt like a toy in the face of this monstrosity. What use was a knife against a beast that could tear him in half with a single strike? But Daniel wasn't just any man. He was human, and humans had survived by doing the impossible, by adapting to every challenge, every adversity. The creature lunged again, but this time, Daniel was ready. He dropped low, letting the beast's massive form pass over him, and then, with all his might, he drove his blade into the gap between the creature's armor. The blow wasn't enough to pierce its thick hide, but it distracted the beast long enough for Daniel to use its own momentum against it. He grabbed a jagged piece of stone from the arena floor, slamming it into the creature's side. The beast howled, stumbling back. Daniel followed up with a series of quick, precise strikes, targeting weak points, looking for any vulnerability. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his resolve never wavered. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about proving to the Zelverin that humans were more than just primitive, fragile creatures. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Daniel fought with an intensity and focus that few of the Zelverin warriors could match. The creature roared in pain, its movements slowing as Daniel pressed the attack, using every scrap of knowledge, every ounce of his willpower. He could feel his muscles burning, his body aching, but he refused to stop. Finally, with a well-placed strike to the base of the creature's neck, Daniel sent the beast crashing to the ground. It let out one final, pained cry before collapsing, its cybernetic systems shutting down with a series of mechanical whirs. The arena was dead quiet. For a long moment, no one moved. The Zelverin had witnessed countless trials before, but never had a human stood so resolute, so unyielding in the face of such overwhelming force. Then, slowly, the crowd began to murmur. The sound swelled, growing louder, until it became a deafening roar of approval. They weren't just applauding his victory, they were recognizing his strength. Daniel stood over the fallen beast, chest heaving with exertion, blood and sweat mixing on his skin. His eyes met Soraya's in the stands. She was watching him intently, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her gaze, something that hinted at respect. "You have proven yourself, human," Soraya's voice echoed over the arena. "But there is still more to come." The crowd's roar intensified, but Daniel's heart pounded harder. The trial was far from over. The arena erupted with an unrestrained roar, the Zelverin court clapping and cheering for Daniel's unlikely victory. The sheer intensity of the moment was overwhelming. Daniel stood at the center, bathed in sweat and grime, his body battered but not broken. The massive creature lay motionless before him, its once imposing form now little more than a hulk of mangled metal and flesh. Yet even as the crowd applauded, Daniel couldn't help but feel a strange emptiness. The trial wasn't over. Daniel had conquered the beast, but Soraya's eyes still watched him, cold, calculating, and filled with something he couldn't quite read. And now the real test was about to begin. "You have passed the first trial," came her voice, amplified over the arena. It was as commanding as ever, the words cutting through the buzz of the crowd. "But there is another, and it is the most dangerous. Are you prepared, human?" Daniel straightened, his exhaustion giving way to determination. There was no backing down now. He had come too far, fought too hard, to let it all slip away. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice was strained. His eyes never left Soraya. "What's next?" Soraya nodded, her eyes gleaming with approval, though her lips remained pursed. "Very well." The ground beneath Daniel's feet rumbled, and the walls of the arena shifted. A deep mechanical hum vibrated through the air as the Colosseum began to transform. The sand beneath him was pulled back, revealing intricate machinery embedded in the stone floor. Panels of glowing, shifting energy formed a ring around him, sealing off any possible escape. Daniel's pulse quickened. This was no longer just a physical trial. The second trial, Soraya's voice echoed, will test your mind, your willpower, and your loyalty. You will face what you fear most, human. Your mind will be your prison. Before Daniel could react, the world around him seemed to disintegrate. He blinked, and suddenly, the arena vanished. The sand was gone, the buzzing crowd replaced by the eerie silence of a dark void. In an instant, he was somewhere else, a place where time and space felt warped. His body was still there, but it was as though he were standing in a dream, the world shifting and changing with each step. Daniel's heart raced. He could feel the sweat on his brow, the breath in his chest, but something was wrong. The air was thick, almost unnatural. He looked around and saw nothing but an endless expanse of darkness. The absence of sound and sight was suffocating. Is this the second trial? He muttered to himself, trying to remain calm. A voice, low, sinister, answered from the darkness. So you think you're ready, human? You think you can withstand the pressure of the Zelvern Empire? Daniel spun around, but there was no one there. The voice came from all around him, its words curling into his mind like a whisper in the wind. You've killed our greatest beasts. You've survived the arena. But do you truly understand the cost of allegiance? Before him, a shadow materialized, long and flowing, an amorphous figure shrouded in the mists of his deepest fears. It was a warrior, one of the Zelvern, but with features that seemed to shift, their face never remaining the same for long. Its eyes, glowing with an eerie red light, locked onto his with a cruel smile. Daniel's pulse spiked. His hand instinctively went for his blade, but it wasn't there. He was unarmed, exposed in this bizarre plane of existence. Loyalty is more than a word, human, the figure said, its voice echoing in his mind. It is a choice, one you will have to make. Will you stand with her? The shadow stretched out its hand, and Daniel flinched, taking a step back. The air grew colder, and the figure took form. No longer a shapeless mass, but a Zelvern warrior standing taller than any he had encountered. The figure's skin gleamed like obsidian, its eyes glowing with the faint embers of a long-forgotten fire. The warrior stepped forward, its gaze never leaving Daniel. You will have to choose. Do you swear loyalty to the Queen? Will you give your life in service to her, as we all do? Or will you turn away, revealing your true weakness? Daniel's chest tightened. The air around him grew thick, pressing down on him like a suffocating weight. He tried to speak, to assert himself, but no words came. The pressure in his mind was relentless, pulling at his thoughts like a whirlpool. Loyalty means strength, human, the warrior continued, its voice rising with an almost mocking tone. And loyalty means sacrifice. Would you die for her as we have? Images flashed before Daniel's eyes, terrifying visions of war, bloodshed, and loss. He saw Zelvern warriors fighting, falling, their lives laid down in the name of an empire. He saw Soraya, strong, beautiful, regal, standing atop a throne of bones, her eyes cold and distant as her warriors gave their lives in her name. He saw the truth of what it meant to serve her, what it meant to belong to the Zelvern Empire. In that moment, Daniel felt something snap within him. His mind was flooded with conflicting emotions. He could feel the weight of the Empire's expectations, the crushing demand for his loyalty, but it wasn't the Zelvern he feared. It was the truth of what they represented. He would not bow to force. He would not submit to something so brutal. With every ounce of willpower, Daniel clenched his fists, gathering all the strength he could muster. No, the world around him shattered. The dark void ripped apart like fragile fabric, and he was back in the arena, the roaring crowd once again filling his ears. The pressure lifted from his mind, but the weight of his decision remained. He had refused the Zelvern warrior. He had refused the choice of blind loyalty. The figure vanished into the air, and the arena returned to its natural state. But the stares of the Zelvern were different now. The crowd fell silent, awaiting Soraya's judgment. Daniel stood tall, breathing heavily but resolute. Soraya's voice echoed again. You have chosen human, and in doing so, you have proven something far greater than loyalty. You have proven independence. She paused, her gaze fixed on him. Then, her lips parted in a rare smile. "You have passed the second trial." The arena hummed with the energy of the crowd, their cheers a stark contrast to the silence Daniel felt within himself. His chest still heaved from the mental strain of the trial, and the weight of Soraya's gaze was enough to make him feel as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. The second trial had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had faced his own mind, fought against the pressure to conform, and emerged with his resolve stronger than ever. But as he stood in the center of the arena, he knew Soraya wasn't finished with him. "You've proven your strength, human," Soraya's voice rang out, softer now, yet no less commanding. "But this final trial will test something far more important than your strength or will. It will test your heart." Daniel's brow furrowed. His heart? What did that even mean? A shiver ran down his spine as the arena shifted once again. But this time, it wasn't the cold, oppressive void he had been thrust into earlier. The ground before him began to melt into something entirely different. A sprawling, unfamiliar landscape that seemed to stretch on forever. Towering trees with dark green leaves, glowing plants that pulsated with light, and distant, faintly glowing rivers. Paradise, or perhaps a trap. "The final trial," Soraya continued, "will test your humanity. You will face a choice, one that no warrior has ever had to make. And you will not face it alone." The transformation of the arena was complete. Daniel stood in the heart of an alien world, surrounded by the beauty of this strange paradise. But he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. He felt eyes on him, an unsettling sensation that sent goosebumps across his skin. The wind shifted, and suddenly, there was movement. From behind the trees, figures emerged. Tall, slender beings with smooth skin and eyes that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. They were Zelvarin, but not the ones he had encountered in the arena. These were different. Their presence exuded power, a raw, untamed energy that sent a chill down his spine. They wore no armor, but their gaze held the weight of centuries. These were the ancient Zelvarin. Daniel took a step back, his pulse quickening. What was this? "You will now face your heart's true test, human." Soraya's voice echoed through the world around him. "You will be given the chance to surrender, to leave this trial behind, to abandon your claim on my throne. Or you will choose to follow your heart and stand with me. You will have the choice to leave, to return to your people, to live a simple life in the safety of your own world." Daniel's mind raced. This was the final trial, and it was more complicated than anything he had faced so far. It wasn't a test of his physical strength, nor was it one of his will. This was a test of his soul, of everything he believed in. The figures in the distance moved closer, revealing more of their enigmatic presence. But what made Daniel's stomach twist was the sight of Soraya among them, stepping from the shadows of the trees, a serene expression on her face. She looked different, more vulnerable, less regal, as if she were just another figure in this strange world. She gazed at Daniel with a quiet intensity, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "I have offered you power, human." Soraya's voice was almost a whisper now, the energy of the arena stripped away. "I have offered you my people, my trust. But now, I offer you my heart." Daniel's breath hitched. Her heart? Was this the ultimate test? Was this the moment where everything would change? She had already chosen him, had declared him worthy of standing by her side. But what was she truly asking of him now? He looked at the ancient Zelvarin, their eyes filled with a silent, powerful wisdom. They were waiting, watching, as if to see what decision he would make. He turned back to Soraya. She stood before him, her towering figure impossibly graceful, even in this strange and dreamlike world. The soft glow of the surroundings highlighted the curves of her armor. Her eyes locked onto his with an unspoken challenge. He had fought for his place among them, but now it wasn't just about survival. It was about belonging, and whether he would accept the final piece of the puzzle. "I don't understand," Daniel said, his voice rough with the weight of his emotions. "Why me? Why now?" Soraya stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. "Because you are human, Daniel. You are raw, untamed in ways the Zelvaran Empire will never understand. You are the spark that this galaxy needs, the flame that can drive us forward, but only if you can look beyond your own needs and see the greater good. The future of my people. The future of this galaxy. The words hung in the air like a cloud, heavy and pregnant with meaning. It was a choice he had to make, not only for himself but for everyone. Could he leave Earth behind? Could he walk away from everything he knew? The people he loved, the world he had fought to protect? Or would he stay and embrace this new future, the one that Soraya was offering him? Choose wisely, Soraya said, her voice as soft as a whisper in the wind. Daniel felt the weight of his decision pressing against his chest, a physical manifestation of the emotional battle waging within him. The thought of returning home to a normal life pulled at him, but something within him knew that he had already transcended the human life he had once known. The galaxy was a vast, untamed expanse, and the fire of humanity, of his humanity, had been sparked here. In Soraya's presence, there was no going back. I choose you, he said, his voice steady now, the words echoing in the vast, shimmering expanse around him. Soraya's eyes brightened, and a soft smile tugged at her lips. The ancient Zelvaran nodded silently in approval. The world around them shifted once again, the surreal landscape fading as the arena returned, and the crowd rose in a chorus of cheers. But in that moment nothing else mattered. Daniel had chosen his path. The crowd's roar was deafening as the arena returned to its usual grandeur, the sounds of Zelvaran warriors celebrating resonating through the vast Colosseum. Yet, for Daniel there was only silence. His decision had been made, the weight of his choice hanging heavy in the air. Standing beside Soraya, he felt the eyes of an entire empire upon him, but it was not fear that filled him. It was something deeper, something more profound. As he looked at Soraya, he saw not just the queen of the Zelvaran Empire, but a woman who had placed her trust in him. Her eyes shone with quiet approval, her lips curling ever so slightly in a smile. You have chosen, she said, her voice soft, yet still holding that commanding edge. And now you will face what you were always meant to be. The ancient Zelvaran gathered in a circle, their presence both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Their gazes were filled with respect and an unspoken admiration. They had witnessed something few beings ever would, a mortal who had risen beyond his own limits, a human who had come to stand alongside them as an equal. Daniel's heart beat heavily in his chest. It wasn't just the choice he had made that echoed in his mind, it was the weight of that decision. He wasn't simply standing with Soraya, with the Zelvaran. He had just changed the course of everything he had ever known. You've earned your place, Soraya said, reaching out to touch his arm. Her touch was warm, grounding, and a quiet confidence radiated from her as her fingers brushed his skin. But there are no more tests, Daniel. You have passed every one, and now we ascend. She stepped back, and the ancient Zelvaran did the same, forming a perfect circle around them both. The air crackled with an energy unlike anything Daniel had ever felt before. His senses sharpened, and a deep, primal understanding settled within him. Something ancient was stirring, something that connected him to these beings in a way he couldn't fully explain. A surge of power rushed through him. At first, a whisper, and then a flood, as if the entire universe were aligning in that very moment. He could feel it pulsing in his veins, a force that was both alien and distinctly human. It was as though the choice he had made wasn't just about loyalty or survival. It was about evolution, the transformation of what it meant to be human in the face of something far grander. This is your ascension, mortal, one of the ancient Zelvaran spoke, his voice as resonant as the stars themselves. You are no longer simply human. You are something more. The others nodded in agreement, their eyes glowing with a reverence that made Daniel feel as though the very fabric of his existence had been rewritten. He was different now, not in the way of a physical transformation, but in the deepest part of his soul. The mortal who had arrived in the Zelvaran arena was now something else. A being who had embraced the cosmic truth that all species, all races, had to understand in order to survive. The will to change, to adapt, to rise. Soraya's voice pierced through the ethereal energy surrounding them. This is more than just a victory. This is a beginning. She stepped forward, her presence commanding the full attention of the assembled Zelverin. Daniel has proven that strength is not about the size of a being or the weight of a title. It is about the heart, the mind, the soul. He has done what many of us could not. He has chosen to rise above the constraints of his birth and become something greater. And in that moment, we are all changed. Soraya raised her hand, the action smooth and deliberate, and the energy surrounding them seemed to concentrate into a singular point. A soft, radiant glow began to form in the air above them, shaping itself into a new form. A symbol of something beyond comprehension, beyond race, beyond mortality. It was a sign of unity, a symbol that transcended everything. The galaxy itself seemed to pause in the weight of the moment. This is not just for him, Soraya continued, her voice now carrying the weight of the entire empire, but for all who will follow. The Zelverin are not the only ones who can claim greatness. The humans are ready to stand beside us. As equals, as partners. Daniel's mind raced as the realization hit him like a wave. This wasn't just about his own ascension, it was about the future of humanity, of Earth. The doors that had been closed for so long were now being unlocked. He was the key, and his choice had not only secured his place among the stars but had opened the way for an entirely new chapter for his people. Soraya turned toward him, her eyes burning with pride. This is the moment when you become one with us, Daniel. You will lead beside me, as an equal. The ancient Zelverin nodded once more, their approval clear. But as Soraya's hand reached out, a final surge of energy enveloped Daniel's body. He felt it. Every cell in his body felt it, a profound transformation taking place. It was as though his very essence was melding with the forces of the galaxy, intertwining with the power of the Zelverin. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though he could see the entire universe, as though he could reach out and grasp the stars. He was no longer just a human, he was something more. The power ebbed away as quickly as it had come, leaving Daniel standing before Soraya and the ancient Zelverin. His body still his own, but his soul elevated. His humanity had not been lost. It had been refined, tempered into something stronger. Soraya smiled, her expression filled with deep satisfaction. You've ascended. Welcome to the Zelverin, Daniel. The crowd erupted into a thunderous cheer. The roar of the Zelverin filled the arena, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Daniel looked out at them, his heart filled with a strange, overwhelming joy. His journey had led him here to this moment, and it was only the beginning. He had chosen, and in doing so he had changed the course of everything. Not just for himself but for all of humanity. The galaxy would never be the same again.